Right in the middle of testing reds and yellows and sprays. Well, we needed to finish that test and we need to get on with this. Now this is the fuselage to Ken's Oriental and what he's got. He's got one coat on here already. We're putting a second coat on. We'd like to probably get 3 coats of clear on, nice thick coats, and then try to primer on this as a test. We don't have the primer yet. John's got to mail it to me, but we'll get this all prepped up and dry in the meantime. How's that going on? Pretty nice? That's a 50-50 mix. 50-50 thinner, 50-50 non-tautening butyrate. Yeah, it's going on real nice. As soon as we get the primer from John, we can spray a coat. I want to try spraying all the primer. I don't want to do they have a special primer they're mixing up for us. So if we just get enough clear on here that the wood is sealed, the primer will be a real test. The next thing I wanted to test, I wanted to see the coverage of red over yellow. And obviously, once you block out the wood grain, which is what the silver does, you really don't have any trouble painting yellows on top. Well, I don't know about yellow on top of red, but red on top of yellow is no problem at all. So if you were to paint a plain yellow and then want to put a red stripe or a star or something on it, that would be no problem at all. This is about 5 parts of thinner to 3 parts of dope.
Really? Stuff must be coming out.
Now what's really been nice, and this we didn't sand the fillet out, of course. What we want to see is eventually, if I leave this out, I'm going to send one of these to John. What I want you to do, John, is put this in the bright sunlight. Take it out on your porch, put a thumbtack or a nail through it, and let it sit in the sun, and we'll see if these fillets bubble up anytime soon. That'll be a good test to see if we can make any improvement on that fillet bubbling problem over epoxy. This is a can. On the previous tape I had painted silver and then tried to see the opaqueness of the silver, and what happens is that the reds dry just a tad dull, just a tad, but that's the price you pay for highly pigmented material. What's really impressive so far about the material is how nice it lays down. And again, I've said that before, that's really a function of thinner. When you put on a nice wet coat, there's not almost no overspray, there is no overspray. Now what we did, this dried what, a half an hour? No, 45 minutes.
45 minutes.
45 minutes, the brush coat dried. And we had a little bit of clear in the gun, so what we're going to do is just use it up. Just get a spray coat on there and get some idea of how's it going on. Pretty nice and smooth?
Oh, yeah, it's really great.
And as soon as we get the primer from John, that's going to be that. That's a. Mike Cooper said he'd be available for the monocoat once we get the wing done. So that'll be a nice little thing we can get on video too. I saw some pictures of his Cardinal, the big Cardinal. It really looks nice. He was up at the meet at Massachusetts Sunday.
Really?
Just use up whatever's in the gun and we'll let it dry a couple of days while the primer is in the mail. Now this, maybe an hour ago, was just a 3608S can. That clear has dried up. I mean, I'm almost thinking that tomorrow we could buff this out. Kenny, did you see how this can dried up?
No.
Oh, the stuff just lays down like glass. It's beautiful.
Boy, no more buffing.
This is turning out to be a pretty good test. Now, roughly 2 hours ago, this prop was a raw wood prop. We've got, we've been back and forth painting it red to see if the red covered the yellow. What kind of... Now, this is not, you don't do this. You don't run off and buff the plane 5 minutes after you paint dries. But what it does, it gives you an indication of as the paint hardens. If it takes a buff now, let's see what that's looking like. I turn the other side over. Let's see the other side, because this, buff the other side. The other one has dust and dirt and everything in it. We're not using this as a prop. We just want to see how that...
Well, I already worked on this side some.
Okay. But it's holding a, it's halfway holding a shine there. That's, oh yeah. Yeah, that's going to be fine. When that dries,
has a hard surface already.
It's not, you know how dope dries and it's always gummy and you put your fingernail in? That's really nice and hard. That's really amazing. All right, so we're learning more and more about the material. We're building our little data bank. I'll send these parts out to John. Just clean that up and I'll send that. Well, send that prop out to John. That'll be a classic. The first prop ever painted with Brodak dope. And you got the fuselage drying out there?
Oh yeah.
All right, great. Now Ken's getting another coat on here on his, building up a substrate of this stuff, and it really looks like it's laying right down. Really nice material to work with, whether you spray or brush. Again, but we're working on building a database.
I don't want to stop.
Nah, you liar. Anyway, the props are out there drying, everything's drying, and Karen needs to go shopping, so that's the end of our test day. Yeah, one of the things that's nice is when it dries hard to the touch, not chewing gummy. So far, very nice material. Looking forward to really getting this going. And the idea is that anybody can do this. The idea isn't that you get 1 or 2 super painters in the world or something to do it. You get average modelers with average skills and a little bit of practice, and you can be doing this hopefully with no problem at all. We're working on it. Looks good. Got all little test ports out here drying. This has been a very interesting test day. Very, very interesting. And I'm looking like for something here that I need to change or work on. Yeah, the fact that it doesn't run as easily as other material is real nice. Even if you get that big wet heavy coat on, you can just turn it a little bit.
Right up to the edge. And
yeah, I was doing the edges of the props really thick too, just to see if it would run. Oh, that's fine.
It doesn't want to hurt you.
Show you something that I really thought was special. The deal was just wanted to see one of the props. We got back from shopping, we had to go grocery shopping. So one of the things I did, now this dope is now 6 hours old. And it's always a test for me, always a problem, because you really have to wait with other brands of dope. You have to wait 6 to 8 weeks to buff it out. And I thought, well, let's put it to the test. You know, we're trying to make improvements in the system. We're trying to make things better. These are the props we painted at, I think around 5 o'clock, 4 or 5, it's now 9. Let's just get a little idea. 5 hours after the dope is dry. Because if you were able to buff this, of course the longer dope hardens and dries, the better it's going to be. But at some point in time, it would be nice to know. We got out the old Gorhams. And I just want to do one blade. I'm not going to spend a lot of time tonight because it's getting late, but I wanted to think about while I'm planning out the next day's projects. See, one of the things I want to do is fly this next time we go to the field and fly the plane, fly with these props that have been painted just to see what the lamination test is and if the paint has any tendency to delaminate. Well, boy, that didn't take long. That is really amazing. I think we're on to that 6-hour-old dope that is buffed. And I'll tell you, I've never been able to do that with dope before. Little tip, believe me, what will happen is this paint will outgas within the next couple of days, so it will be appropriate to recheck the balance within a couple of days. This thing's just a little bit harder, a little heavier. But this has been a real eye-opener working with this. And this dope, by the way, is crystal clear. It's like water. It has no tint of orange to it. Some of the brands of clear that you, other than the normal brands, you can buy dope that has a blue tint or an orange tint. This is absolutely crystal clear. And still have just a little to take off. And I like to finish the job up with some Gorms. They say the weather tomorrow might be flyable. If it is, we're going to want to hopefully get out and get some flights on this. But if I get it all prepped up tonight, it'll mean I can get down the field early tomorrow before we lose the air. But if not, if it's a terrible day, we have so many projects to work on here. Cardinal kits to make. We're trying to get ready for Brodax. Profile contest coming up this Sunday at Circle Burners. Lots of stuff to work on. That'll do it. Okay, we're up the club field. First thing we want to do is get a square one. And what we've been trying to do is develop some props that'll work well on the double star 40. One of the ones that worked well we used in Massachusetts was the 11.6. We don't have an 11.5 sitting here, but we have another 11.6, and we want to do that paint test. Now, the reason I paint a prop, and this is dried about almost 24 hours now, I want to find out how good this is going to stick to raw wood. And usually if the paint all starts peeling off a prop, you know you don't have enough thinner in the paint, or some other problem with the paint might exist. So this will be a good test. We'll get a couple flights on the original prop and then get the painted one on there and just get some readings on how it's working. Get an idea. Now this paint is nearly not 24 hours old yet. It's already got a nice gloss on it. the other things we wanted to try today, even though we don't have some really great air here. One of the things we wanted to try is running uniflow and non-uniflow. We haven't done that on this motor. Even though the air is shifty here, we're going to just get a couple more flights here before we pack it in for the day. Now, so far we've only run the double star on what amounts to be uniflow muffler pressure, so this will give us a good chance now. Get a couple of flights. And what I did, I put a fuel filter in between the muffler and the uniflow vent. I can try that without a filter and with a filter. The reason was we were getting a little bit of dirt in the tank there back in Massachusetts on a couple of the runs. I wasn't happy with it, and we were picking up little junk. Tank is finally cleaning itself out, which most tanks do after 40-50 flights where you don't get anything out of them. But it'll be interesting to see now. This motor brakes a lot harder than the K&B, has a little bit less total power, but much nicer characteristics, soft stunt characteristics. So it'll be an interesting test to do uniflow and no uniflow and see if both ways work equally well. The only thing I wish we had today, I wish we had a little bit nicer air to do this testing in. Even though I don't really try to do, when I'm doing testing like this, I don't really try to maximize low bottoms or really even concentrate on geometry or anything. I just try to do the test so I can feel what I'm trying to feel for, in this case the motor run characteristics. I know that on uniflow, this motor was just really nice, very predictable. We still haven't done a lot of the other tests that we'd like to with fuel, glow plugs, and whatever, but we've got all the big things right really early on here. And we actually have gotten some nice flights. So let me give this one shot. This will be with an open uniflow vent. We still would need to, of course, we have 3 or 4 other props. In fact, I picked up an APC in Massachusetts, and I have one of John Duncan's props to try too. But this one seems to be really in the ballpark. It's a good feeling to get that done right away. That's one of the only downsides of this motor, and actually of all of these little motors, they don't really like to start hot. I haven't come up with a magic solution for that yet. Well, I got Mike Kajeski suckered into doing some of the test flying here, but going back and forth, uniflow and non-uniflow, I think the motor runs good both ways. It's almost imperceivable to make a difference. It's been braking nice. And what I try to do is I run one a little bit too lean and one a little too rich to see which one has the wider envelope. And it seems like they're about equal, so at least I know this motor will be happy both ways, pretty much. And it's nice to see Mike out here. He's going to be doing some heavy-duty work on my two-family house pretty soon, so he won't get to do a lot of flying. It's nice that he can just breeze out here on his lunch hour and scam a few flights. He's a good man. He's the one that's responsible for taking care of the circle burner field. He does all the landscaping, all the tree cutting, all the, I don't know, turtle removal, whatever else they do. We had such a good time Sunday with everybody flying this and giving me good feedback that I already got 2 calls from people that want kits. So we're making up a little priority list of anybody that would like to be on the first production run of kits. Give me a call and place a firm order. No problem. I'm sure this list is going to grow as these videos go floating out into the world of the stunt world, reality and beyond. Well, we've made the most of a really crummy day. Air has been really crazy. It's been on and off, up and down, moving around, but and we got Mike motivated. That's the main thing. The original prop that we had on a plane all along, BYN 011-6, and what I'll do with this is sand the rest of the wood off, and I'll make a couple of these spares. These seem to work nice on a double star. Seem to be just about the right load. The 11.5s and the 11.6s both. Well, I wanted to take some of my 4-bladed props up here. I had that Brian Ether prop that I've never had on the Seafire. I just wanted to do a little testing here. It looks like a day. It's supposed to rain early in the afternoon, so we're not getting too excited. I just wanted to try to get 1 or 2 flights on this. Get some idea of how that prop is going to relate to. This is the prop off the Spitfire. We know this one. Well, we hope this one is in the ballpark. The Nats are a full month away, and we're going to try to get a couple of flights every day on this until we make a decision which plane we're going to fly and which setup we want to use. I have a new motor to try. I don't have it in the plane yet, but I just wanted to come out and get familiar with the plane again, get some square one flights, and maybe beat the rain today if I can. You can see the club field, the water has gone down quite a bit, but boy, the mosquitoes are a problem. Man, if you only had any idea about the mosquito problem here. Boy, I put a whole can of off on me in one flying session already. Okay, now of course the air is not conducive to doing good stunt patterns here, but it's an excellent day to do prop testing. So the first thing is to get a square one with a prop we know gives us a ballpark setting, ballpark airspeed, and then we want to go right into, and I've got the whole bag here, and we can use up whatever time is left today going through our spinners and props. And most of all, I'm using a new can of off every day now. I bought a 6-pack of off. So we want to go back and forth with 2s and 3s and 5s and basically use this day. Now we can't really fly stunt patterns, and the whole trick is to do this kind of testing when you can't fly stunt patterns, and when you get a day you can fly stunt patterns, then you can just come out with the best setup you have up to that point. Now what I really want to do is I want to go right through the 4 blades before this will save me some time in not having to change the spinner. It's a little time consuming to change the spinner on this, but you want a semi-scale plane, you basically have to pay. Anyway, I got 3 of these 4 blades to test, and then I can mark my little notebook up which has the most pitch. I know we've de-pitched one of the Brian Ether one. This one is de-pitched quite a bit too. we've never had the Brian Ether one on here, but just as a reference, it has just a little bit more pitch, and that would be fine for the air that we have today. But just getting these in sequence, getting them in order right now will be a significant help to me. And I always go back and forth. My staple here with this plane, at least, was the one I used at the Nats last year, and at the team trials is the 14.5 cut to probably 12.5, 12 5/8. That's always the staple prop. But if we can get one of these working, hey, we can always go back to square one. And we haven't really wasted a day. That's the main thing. Now, because I want to go through a lot of props and I'm not really concerned with the geometry, I'll leave the spinner off and I can go through the other two, 1, 2, 3 then right away. And by the way, that's a good way to do your testing, because then you get the effect that the air is the same from one of the test flights to the next. And there's very subtle little pitch changes in these props. It's almost imperceivable. You almost can't see it with a naked eye. You have to measure it with one of those little wooden motor mat gauges, but having 3 different pitches, certainly, this is the kind of stuff you want to do now, not the day you get out to the Nats the first day. And well, you never can explain to people. You gotta have almost everything working, because when you get there, you only get one flight every 10 hours with the circles the way they have them. And let's hope that's going to change. But my feeling is I like to do as much of the preparation at home. On days that it's unflyable, like today, where the wind is kicking and howling and moving and twisting, the more of this I can get done during those times, the better off I am. Now, I also get a feeling here too, if the needle is set pretty much the same as it was for the square one prop, then I know I can measure the prop load too. Since this has never been on this plane, I want to get a rough reading here with the needle the same. So now we have some real good data. We know that this is our square one prop, and this is the one we reference most things to, since we know that prop works well out in Indiana. And we know that this prop now has a little bit less pitch and less motor load. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this, make my little note on a sheet, make a little note to add some pitch to that when I get back to the shop today. So that constitutes one of the little fine-tuning things I can do on a day that really isn't appropriate for flying stunt patterns. Now, each time I do one of these for a little test, and it's hard to convince people of a couple of things. One of them is how invaluable it is to have the prop pitch just right. When it interacts with the motor load just right, you get that really hard, non-runaway 2-4 run. When it's wrong, a whole myriad of things happen. Now, as an example, with this prop, it's under-pitched. So what would happen if we wanted to run the prop, or if we had no way of changing the pitch? What we'd be doing is upping the compression, opening up the Venturi, using more fuel. The whole setup would now go out of whack, and I'd have to have a whole myriad of new square ones. But if I increase the pitch just a little bit, basically at the tip, what's going to happen? I can come back to the field the next day, or on a day like today when you can't do precision stunt, and I can use that day to fine-tune the prop. Now imagine trying to do this out at the Nats with everybody partying in all the rooms and all the things going on. This is the kind of stuff, if you can make the commitment to do this on a what looks like it may even rain day, now comes that nice day, the air is nice, and you can go out and fly the plane and get real practice flights. You know you've got all your little square ones in a ducks in a row, square ones in a row. Now, the prop seemed like it was close enough that I probably could go in 2 clicks on a needle and have it, but I don't want that. I want all the square ones to be the same. I want to have it that when I do make a change, I don't have to change the motor and the head and the Venturi. I want all of the tuning to be done right up in front using a combination that I'll probably use right at the Nats this year. So this is valuable, and this is a good way to approach it. Now, we spent time with Johnny Duncan out at the mass meet, and he was changing things faster than a hen can lay eggs. And you never get any feedback that's of any value. You got to do it one step at a time. I need to make a note now, and I'll put this prop right in the front of the truck, that this prop needs a little more pitch. Because obviously at the end of the day, with my memory and no ginkgo biloba, I'll forget everything. I'll forget how to get home. Now I know I have my square one. I know this one needs more pitch. And off camera I'll do the other one and just see if I'm close or if I need more pitch or less pitch. It's never going to be any different than that. Now with the 3 blades, there's a couple other factors that come into it. Number one is it's difficult to fly 3-blade wood props, even though these work real well. These are the ones Walt Prey made me. Especially this one. This is cut down 14.5 blades. These work real well, but there's one really big downside. When you're flying on the club field over grass and the plane comes to the end of the run and noses, you can break the blade. So the only prop I'm going to test here, and I want to get one flight on it, is the carbon. Now the carbon, of course, it doesn't make any difference. Nothing bad happens. But I'll save these for when we actually go to Middlesex. And this is one thing last year, because we didn't have a lot of time before the Nats. We never got to try a lot of these props. Today is an excellent day to do it. And one thing to always keep in mind, and I always have to remind myself of it because I get out here and I get sunstroke thinking about other things. When you switch from a wood to a carbon prop, usually the weight is somewhere in the neighborhood of half to an ounce difference. And a lot of times it'll have a very subtle, if you don't even notice it, change on the vertical CG. In this case, I know when I go back to the wood props, I need to go out and tweak my little trim tab out on the end of the wing, because the weight that's above the CG in this plane is extremely sensitive to it with the pointy tips, the elliptical tips. It's real sensitive to the vertical CG, maybe more so than a, I don't know, I guess a nobler kind of wing or a Cardinal wing. But in this case, just doing the testing, I'm skipping that step because I'm really just looking for the speed relative to the way the motor is running. I want to stay in the power band of the motor. I don't want to scream the motor to go faster. And yet really what I'm comparing is the pull at a given RPM or at a given motor setting, and that motor setting is where the motor is too foreign at its peak. That's where I want to have, at that exact speed, that's where I want to have the torque come on. I don't want to have the torque come on by going in 10 clicks on the needle. Here's the rarest of rare things that happen. It probably only happens to me once or twice a year, is I get the 4-blade and this one to almost fly totally identical. So now I have absolutely two square one choices here of prop. This one and the 4-blade, you almost can't tell which one's on the plane. They're really, really close. So this one now, for all purposes, is in the bank. See what happens as I go through a testing day. I keep making notes for myself. Here, one of the things I want to do, I want to up-pitch my 4-blades, and this is my work list to work off when I get back to the shop. I just noticed there's a little bit of a paint crack in the outer flap, so I want to make a little note, because I'll forget this, and I want to put a little epoxy over that. I want to paint this 3-blade. I'm real happy I have a 3-blade and a 4-blade now that are both what I'll call square one props. And of course, at the end of the day, I'll get a spinner all set up for that too. Having a little work list to work with. I don't know how old you are. I don't know how intelligent you are. Probably more intelligent than me, but I forget. I have so many things on my list to do here, and I try not to waste any time. So even what I want to do now, just for my own, and this is really where it gets a little complicated. I want to take the same prop. I want to go out 2 clicks on a needle and just fly it, and go in 2 clicks on a needle, and that gives me a 5-click range. And if I have a 5-click range with any prop, I consider that to be a square one prop. That means if I can fly and do a reasonable go through the stunt pattern without getting blown out of a maneuver on the slow side or on the fast side, that it doesn't turn into the SST, that gives me a 5-click range, and that usually means that you won't miss the needle setting that much. And that's one of the beautiful parts about the Tiger 60 setups. You almost never can't fly the plane. You miss by 1 click and you're really just a little slow, 1 click and you're just a little fast. It's one of the advantages you have with this type of a setup. Now, of all things, one of the things that's surprising to me is how close I've got the pitch on this 3 and the 4 that's now the number 1. So having 2, this really gives me one extra option, because one of the things is this prop is just a little bit lighter, so I'm going to need a little bit tweak on the tab to get this dialed in, just to get it exactly the way I want it. And that's one of the reasons I don't like to tweak flaps. I have that little tab always. I can tweak it up, tweak it down, make fine adjustments as I adjust the vertical CG right at the field. If you don't have that ability and you're bending flaps, you never get it the same twice. Almost every time you wipe the plane off, it's different than the time before. Now we're through with this part of the test. Now one thing nice, this has absolutely, probably even wider than a 5-click range, especially on the rich side. On the rich side, it just seemed to be motoring right through everything here today. So I'm going to, right now, put a kibosh on this and test a couple of the 2 blades, because I want to have a 2, a 3, and a 4, and a 5, all that are real close, so I have every choice, and I know which is going to give me a little more thrust, which is going to give me a little bit less. And I want to know it ahead of time. Now this was a surprising prop testing session for a lot of reasons. I didn't really think I was going to get that 3-blade to work as well as it did, and I'm so happy with it. I'm so convinced that it's going to be one of my number 1 props. What I'm going to do is make sure that when I get home, I'll paint the scale effects on it. Now, one of the other things I have, what I call my square 1 prop, is always a 14.5 rev up, and this is a volley that I've just changed the pitch in. Tried to make it very similar to, well, make it exactly similar to the 14.5 pitch, but of course the props all have different characteristics. And in the case of this plane, it's to my advantage to get some of the weight off the top of the plane. Plane always this one tends to be a little top heavy. So one of the things I'm trying to do is, this prop is lighter than the 3-blade, just get a reference on it, and then I know it'll be even lighter. In fact, I'll probably have to tweak the tab again. It'll even be lighter with the wood prop, but at the end of this day, as boring and awful as it is, and by the way, what happened you'll love this. On the last flight, I was just fooling around and having fun, not really paying strict attention, and a bug flew in my mouth, and I swallowed about. Well, I just know Banjock would love that, but that's all part of being a test pilot, I guess. I've done this many times as I forgot to hook up the pressure line. In fact, I did that at the Nats one time. Almost need somebody to remind me at my age. I guess we've just hit a lucky day here for doing prop work. This one is really in the bank too, so I've got some real results here today. I've got 3 props now that I hope are going to constitute my square 1. Now I had 2 other props here, one that was made by Dennis Totha's friend and one made by Bill Lee. Both of these props, when I had them on a plane, were so underpitched that I'm not even going to up-pitch them. I'm just going to leave them as low RPM props. They have very thin razor blade sections. They don't really work as well as the big volley. The big volley in a 60 with the wide thick blades always seems to work well. And of course I have my square 1 always sitting here, 12.3 diameter. This is the one I've used over and over and over as my square 1 prop for the 2 blades. So I want to give that a test next. Coming up on the end of what time I can allocate to this, but certainly today I've got more knowledge now than I had when I got here today, and that's always the goal. I also have what I hope is going to be my 2 or 3 what I'll call square 1 props that I know give the right load to the engine, keep it in the range that I want to run it in. I just noticed another thing as I'm sitting here. I noticed the wheels are worn out. Now, even from taking off on this field or being at the Nats, wearing out the wheels is a constant problem. These Dave Brown wheels don't last forever, that's for sure. So we're going to get a new pair of wheels on a plane. We're going to fix the flap tonight, paint up our 3-blade the next session we get, and we will have, I just hope we're just a little bit further on in the trim of the plane. I'll have to set up the 2-blade spinner again. And hope we get a day coming up soon. Well, I hope that we're going to get a day that we can do some real practicing in. Now in today's mail, man, just sit back, but it blew me away when I opened the envelope. Take a close look. This is Michael Ames, of course. This is Michael's Cardinal. Look at this Gilmore racer. Oh my God, is this awesome. The people that really are into 30s racers, and I'm just to name a few, Tom Niebuhr, myself. Oh my God. Michael, you've outdone yourself. Look at the lettering job on this even. I gotta tell you, I was very... I was dying to get Michael to get into my discount long distance phone service. Then I realized he's on an aircraft carrier or a ship or something. Doesn't work anyway. Well, you can't sign up the whole world. That's all there is to it. Gilmore Oil. Look at this beautiful lettering. That absolutely is beautiful. Michael, I'm absolutely impressed. Absolutely outdone yourself. Give us a really good test. Just what we need, more testing. So give us a good test. We want to see how Brodak's dope, soon to be released dope, is going to stick to a carbon prop. But anytime you paint a carbon prop, obviously first thing you want to do is roughen it up with some 600 paper. And I want to check the balance most of all. Make sure I don't have any crazy balance, something out of balance. I'll paint the tips first and paint the base of the prop. And what this will be a real good test of is to see how the clear coats that we're now using, how they're going to stick to carbon fiber. And there's no better test than to paint a propeller. If it sticks to a propeller, you can pretty well know that it's going to stick. M600 will get all the oil off. And by the way, this really was a good testing day. I never underestimate how much value you can get out of an unflyable day. Now, in our part of the country, of course, we have plenty of these unflyable days, which is why we get plenty of time to do this testing. I don't know, if I lived in a nicer part of the country, maybe I'd just fly all day. Never do any of this, but... Now, also, I want to round off all the edges. If we don't have a razor edge, I want to take my poor little tootsie finger off. By the way, I really did swallow that bug. I can still taste them. Oh, man. Banjock, you put the curse on me. Oh, actually, we still have the yellow in the gun. We'll run out and get that. Boy, it looks like it's going to rain any minute out there. But time management is such an important thing. Always underestimated by a lot of people. They think, oh, well, you know, some people are just lucky they get a lot done. No, they're not lucky at all. They just figure little ways of getting it done. I've tried to pass that information on. Now, in this case, what I'm doing, I want to get the little yellow tiplets, pull that off, and they'll all be even. Now run out. I still have the yellow in the gun, so I'll just get these tips painted. Now, while that's drying, I want to up-pitch that 4-bladed prop. That's the next thing on my list. See, one thing is drying, one thing I'm working on. I'm trying to really pack a lot of work into a short amount of time. Just walking back here and I'm looking at Karen's really got some nice roses growing here. Tiger lilies are all starting to bloom. Everything's starting to bloom. Everything's in bloom here. You know, we're waiting for some rain. We could use some rain here. Yeah, the whole world is full of beautiful things. You just got to look for them. Little guy growing on the edge of the pond. Do I love my backyard? Do I love my pond? Oh my God, I love my sea fire. So nice to be, while paint is drying, you'll be out here. Come on, paint, dry, you sucker. Okay, now, if I didn't have notes, I'd forget everything. I know this is my square one, so I'm going to get out the gauge that checks the pitch an inch from the tip. Clean this prop up as long as I have it off. This has already been painted. And I want to get the prop the pitch equalized to this one. Now, there's several ways of pitching these props. You can stick them in boiling water. My first choice, I like to do it with a hairdryer and a little wrench. And I find that to be real effective. And this is Brian Ether's prop, by the way. And if you look at a Brian Ether next to a Bowley, the hub is thicker. Actually, the tips are even thicker. The whole prop blade is thicker, so. Here's my little gauge, a little piece of extra motor mount wood. Nothing high tech here. Now let's see if you can see when this is held. We're under pitched. The front of the prop blade is hitting before the back. So this prop actually has less pitch than the square one. So I'll take one blade at a time, heat them. Now I'm really only concerned with the last inch, but I do heat the blade about halfway. Good idea to use a, I don't know, what you, pot holder, oven mitt. You'll see at some point in time the resin will get soft. The temperature at which it gets soft is about 156 degrees. So what happens is at 156 degrees, you'll probably really burn your hand if you're not careful. But the idea is you want to do all the pitching and all the equalizing, everything before you paint the prop. And then when you get to that square one setting, and you'll see the prop is always softer out at the tip because it's thinner. If you dunk it in boiling water, count to 4 or 5, that brings the prop right, softens it right up instantly. By doing it this way, I can feel it getting softer. So now I can eyeball it down. Now if you look, I'm going to do this as a demo. Now if you look down it, you'll see the back of the blade is hitting before the front. So I know, whoop, I know I can put a little more pitch in there. I know this gauge is on the low side. Just watch, it's hot. And obviously one of the things I could do is just change the gauge, grind it, sand it, or put another piece of wood. You can see how many times I've changed the setting for these props. Good idea to put a little scratch on the back of which blade is which. Something to identify, because what happens eventually, you want to get them all equal. You'll get one a little too high or too low, and it's easier to reference. The only way you can reference these really is, we know this one is the warm one. Okay, and I'll just go right down the blades here. Just making sure that each one now will have the leading edge up just a little bit, just a very tiny little bit. Now the other thing, if you go too far with one blade, just soften it again and bring it back. Now, it does take a little time to get the blades equal. In this case, I've gone too far on this blade. And it's a good idea, if you've never done this, practice on an old prop, one that's chipped or one that you're not going to use. And practice by starting with 2 blades before you get into 3s and 4s where it's complicated. Just remember too, as you're increasing the pitch, you're increasing the load on the motor, so you have 2 variations here. Obviously, if you put 10 inches of pitch in here, it's going to be real difficult for the engine to turn it. You're loading the motor more with pitch. Okay, these are all set now. We have ready for another day of testing. And once we get all three exactly the same, obviously then we can go ahead and paint these up. Again, this stuff, it seems like at times it's so time consuming, but to me it's a very important part of a plane, the propeller, in terms of performance and even in terms of how it looks. I mean, to go through all this work of making a Spitfire or a Seafire or a Mustang or whatever, and then to just stick a wooden prop on it, it seems like the cheap way out. Anyway, I want to get the spinner cut out now for this volley. In case we get the fly tomorrow, no guarantees. That one's in the bank. Spinner doesn't fit because we never had this hollowed out for the volley, so let me get the Dremel and take care of this. I don't know how many times I have to do this, but I don't want to make a big giant hole, and I want to keep it kind of symmetrical if I can. Again, we have spinners for the 2 to 3 to 4, and I want to make sure all of them fit without a problem now. I'm trying to make this a nice tight workmanlike fit here. There we go. I got this all set to go. Realized, my own fault, realized I didn't have a 3-bladed spinner back plate. I don't know if Joe Adamusco has it, so I wanted to get all these setups done today. Obviously I can't get the 3-blade setup done until I get the back plate. I also wanted to replace the wheels. These, oh, can't believe these wheels, they just wear out like that. You can see they wear the treads right off. Look at the shape of these. Anyway, because I'm landing on grass most of the time, I certainly don't want to go and have these little tiny wheels catch in a rut or in a hole or something. A nice set of extra landing gear and about 25 sets of Dave Brown wheels around for just such an occasion. Where they really do wear. The only chance we get to clean behind the wheels here and all these landing gear details. By the way, these things have held up 2 seasons now. They've held up really well, no cracks. This seems like overkill, having an extra set of landing gear legs, having 2 sets of landing gear legs, having 3 sets of legs. It all seems like overkill until all of a sudden one day, what happens? You break a landing gear leg or something loosens up or something. You need a tire, a wheel. One of your friends needs a tire and a wheel. Then you can be a real hero. And I like to keep, this is one thing I know of several people that at the Nats have had a problem. And they have landing gears loosen up in a wing or a wire break. Especially if you're using an inexpensive wire. You're not using real machinist grade wire. Well, all it takes is a little sandwich bag and get the little spares made up ahead of time. In this case, a new set of wheels now on here. And again, now the wheels too. By putting bigger wheels on, I'm varying the CG a little bit. And I'll be able to tweak that tab again when we actually get out and do some flying. Very unlikely we're going to get flying anytime in the next day or so. It looks like it's going to rain. Whoop! President Rain Nixon. If you can see, there's a little crack in a flap. See, and what I want to do, I want to make a little, like a blister or something to stiffen that up, because I know this is cracked before and I've repaired it. This is the second time, so obviously I should have put a couple more coats of glass there or used a little bit stiffer piece of wood. But there's always a way to repair things. There's always a way to sneak by. I just carved up this little balsa. I don't want to try it. I know this isn't semi-scale, but it just kind of reflects that and it'll stiffen that area up. and I'll make a matching one for the other side. And I'll put that finish on with a couple of coats of CA and just paint it with a brush and spray it with some clear. And in a day or so I'll be ready. That'll stiffen that area up enough that I hope it'll never crack again. And I brushed over the CA. There were 3 coats of this, and good that we always have the touch-up paint. We'll never paint a custom plane without some supply of touch-up paint. And that's got to dry overnight now. Now take a close look at these photos. This is from Scott Reese. Now Scott Reese is one of the ones working on the Jim Walker bronze bus project that we've mentioned on the tapes from time to time. Anyway, I'm going to read this real close. He says the engine is an, look at the muffler here. The engine is an OSFS FP40 stock with a Tornado 1043 blade, Max 6650 muffler. This photo probably shows the nose end a little bit better. Thunderbolt RC plug, 4-ounce tank, 58-inch lines, lap times of 5.1, 11,500 RPM, and a perfect 2.4 brake. That, by the way, that muffler does have a good volume to it. I flew this at the Northwest Regionals. After my flight, the experts came over to ask what it was. Paul Walker, Dave Fitzgerald, Ted Fancher, all thought it was a cool way to go. Hey, everything's cool, Scott. Even Fox 35s, even Tiger 60s are cool. Anyway, thanks for the photos, and we'll get you out your Cardinal kit today. If I can be of any help, just give me a call. Now in today's mail, got a real nice set of pictures from George Renner. I want to share these with you. And he asked me to send them on to Bill Harding. Bill Harding, I'm sure, is going to enjoy receiving these too. Now I'll read right off the letter. And by the way, George, thanks a whole lot. I really appreciate sharing the pictures with us. 1 to 4, my interpretation of a 40 size Cardinal K&B 40, 17-inch tail, 39 ounces. George, you beat me by 3 ounces. Flies great. All these planes have a built-up profile body. Reduced Cardinal wing, 55-inch span now. Just going to go right through these, because this relates to photos 1 to 4. And because George is in the auto body restoration, we expect perfection in finishing. Hey, this looks real good. I gotta tell you, it looks real good. Oh, wing gear too. I didn't even notice. Wing gear. Now this is George's photos 5 to 14. Full-size Cardinal wing. My tip and flap shape. Hey, can't help you for that. 18-inch tail. That's the right number. Moki 51, 48 ounces. Flies unbelievable. I'll bet it. Hey, George, just put it in a box and send it to me. Photos 10 and 11 are my wife. I hope I'm saying it, Cheryline. Let's get to those first. George, not that not that we don't want to see you here, but let's see. All right, here we go. Now that is a nice, now come on, you gotta admit that is a nice Cardinal. Hard not to like that. Here's some pictures of the plane in raw wood, 48 ounces. You must have some nice 4-pound wood there. By the way, you could send me that wood too. Photos 15 to 18, my first full-bodied ship, Cardinal wing, 2 center ribs removed, 58-inch wing, 17-inch tail. This is photo 15, so I guess hard to reference. I'm writing a reference. And of course the woodwork is immaculate. Look at the cowl work. Now he'd be a candidate for a molded cowl if there ever was one. Now just look at these. Absolutely beautiful. Now obviously what it looks like he's done is make a hollow profile body, a carbon mat on the inside. Well, maybe on the outside. It looks real nice though. I don't know. I wonder if he has his own flying field. Looks like there's enough room to fly back here. And since we're going to be doing a lot of testing of Brodak dope real soon, even more, hey George, I hope you'll join us and do some testing. With your expertise and knowledge, I'm sure you'll be able to add something to our dope development program. Please feel free to contact John for some samples or whatever as soon as they're available. Anyway, I appreciate it a whole lot, and as you've requested, I will pass them on to Bill Harding. One of the good little tricks for gluing these little guys on, I haven't been able to buff them out yet, but I put a couple of coats of Brodak dope on them, wet sanded it out, and usually you could buff these out. At least I buffed the other stuff out. Use it about 2 hours after I painted it. But I don't want to rush this because we're not going to get the fly today, of course. But a good trick now, and this is a trick you can use when you want to make little repairs or patches. I want to epoxy these in place, and they'll stiffen up the flat, but I want to mix up some 5-minute epoxy with some black dye in it, so it'll be black epoxy, and then you won't see that line around the edges as pronounced as you would if it was clear. You know you know what would happen if you tried to CA these in place. You'd have them a little bit crooked, and it would kick just before you'd get them right in the right position you want. The epoxy allows you to have a little bit of time to get them in position. I can't tell you how many times I've used this trick. A little jar of epoxy dye from Florida Glue Products is about $3, and you can get any color you want, really. Now, if you were doing a repair over white, putting a little bit of white dye in here, it would just make the repair that much easier. Now, of course, I'll clean the area where these are going to go with M600, get them tacked up. And once that sets up, I'll just hit that with a little Gorms. Make sure they're lined up relatively close. And we'll see if we get any. This weekend's supposed to be a rain out, but hope we get a couple of days of flying. Well, we're not disappointed today. It's raining. We're going to see what we can do about waiting out the weather and seeing if it gets any better later in the day. It's miserable. Here we are at Lake Middlesex.
Think Jerry Sipper ever went through anything?
Nah, I don't think any of them ever went. We have waited out the rain in a diner. The field is covered. Monsoon. We have really gotten rained on here. But one of the things we wanted to try today, we got some trim tabs on this just to see if we could make a little bit of an improvement. And we have some technology that Big Jim passed along to Ken on how to trim this type of plane out with the unequal panels, and we're going to try to see if it works. And if it does work, how well, and maybe we'll even get some decent flights today. I don't know. Except for the fact there's definitely the possibility it could still rain. But we're out here, dyed in the wool, diehards. Now, one of the things, any plane with unequal panels, bigger inboard wing, they trim a little bit differently, and I'm not really super familiar with this type of trim. So we're going to depend on other people that have more experience, like Big Jim, George Aldrich, whomever, would like to donate some information on this unequal panel thing. But it really was, we had flown it a whole day, and it was light on line tension above 45. And when you put enough tip weight in it, it would just rock and bang the tip, because it doesn't have the same size outboard panel. But obviously years ago people flew them this way, people won the Nats this way or whatever. But what we wanted to do, and this was Big Jim's idea, was to put a trim tab on the rudder. What did Jim say, a ½ ounce of tip weight?
Yeah, ½ ounce of tip weight.
Okay.
We're over that now, but I want to do one thing.
Yeah. Well, let's see how this works, assuming you get some flights in before the rain comes. before another monsoon comes. In fact, it looks like it's starting to rain right now. In fact, it is raining. Oh, you're just so lucky, Ken. Well, sometimes it just doesn't pay to get out of bed.
You said...
I promised this wouldn't happen. I lied. That's the way it goes. Singing in the rain. Oh, man. Singing in the rain at Middlesex.
You run them when they don't go through water.
Yeah. You sure you don't want to use your solids today? This looks like, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, never use solids on a day when it's raining or the humidity's high. Don't even try it. Braided lines today only. Just as a matter of a point of interest, anybody that's interested in one of these foam cradles for working on a plane, Ken's going to be manufacturing kits for making them real soon, with all the foam parts cut and ready to glue. And we are not lucking out with the weather. I am not optimistic. We are trying to get some trim flights, but boy, the weather is, this is just one of those days. You feel like you should be in church or something instead of here. Anyway. Now all we're really trying to accomplish out here today is to see if this combination of trim tabs and things is going to make any improvement in the tension over 45 degrees. We've also got 10% fuel in here. And what we're really looking for here is one of the problems is just to try to get more tension above 40, we're at the end of the flight, above 45 degrees. By the way, those things really do work well. Whether you make your own or get one from Ken, they are real handy, especially on a day like today. Going to the car wash? Oh, you look, you almost missed the puddle. Well, it was lean, okay. What else?
It's got line tension from hell now.
No, it was going fast, though. So back out a little bit on the needle and let's try it again while you got some air between storms here. Just slow it down and see what happens. Yeah. I think it looked fine. It looked the same upright and inverted. Just
adding the offset and the tabs.
Big help, right?
For some reason, it doesn't want to show you all that wing. So it might be time to take a piece of tip weight out.
Okay, well, fly at the right speed first. Get the speed down. Come out 2 or 3 clicks on a needle and we'll try it again. Again, I flew it once, Ken flew it once, and it's still nose heavy. Now, we don't want to take the spinner off. We're just going to put 1/4 ounce of solder on the tail wheel for now, just to get through the trim flights of the day. And also what we're trying to accomplish is the plane toward the end of the flight has a much nicer corner than in the beginning of the flight. So by moving the CG back just a little bit, it's still on a nose heavy side. This'll get the CG that where it was hopefully at the end of the flight, it's now in the beginning of the flight, and it'll give us a little nicer corner. Always a good idea to have some solder, and this is, once we get figured out exactly how much we want, so we can cut a little piece of lead, weigh it on a grain scale and glue it inside the body or somewhere where it's less conspicuous. But the nice thing about the solder on a tail wheel is then you can adjust it minute to minute. You can take half of it off, a third of it off, until you get the feel that you want. How many planes I've seen at the Nats flying in a Walker fly-off with solder, it's just so easy to do. Or you can make brass tail wheels. When we had Ron had his job at the machine show, you don't even try to make it pretty, because you're going to wind up taking it off anyway. Ron used to make us brass tail wheels. That's another nice way to go. I remember Bob Barron had a whole selection of brass tail wheels for one of his Avantis. And this will let us experience the feel at the beginning of the flight that we had at the end of the flight.
And it looks really good. It's shiny.
And it's attractive, yeah. It's attractive. Buff it out, too. By the way, another nice side thing with these boxes is keeping your tools inside there on a wet runway. I know Ken's already got orders from a few people, so maybe he'll even improve the design, have some little thing in there to hold your Allen wrenches and glow plugs or something. I don't know. More to come. All right, you ready? Move the lead outs forward, too. Do that. Do them both. Now, it may take Ken a little while to get used to this, but the solder on a tail wheel makes a dramatic difference. And we'll find out as soon as he does something where he really lays it down. See, it's going to take him a while to get used to this, I can see. He's over-controlling it like crazy, which is normal. But even a small amount of solder on a tail wheel will make a dramatic increase in the corner. See, now he's over-controlling it like crazy. All right, calm down, big guy. We also have a nice little side thing. We have, where is the guy now? I gotta find him. Oh, he went, oh, there he is. Shooting golf balls out onto the circle while we fly. Now, I want to look him over real close, make sure he's not bigger than I am. Because if one of those balls comes over here, I can tell you where it's gonna wind up. I'm gonna get within 3 feet of him and throw it at him, and then go break the windshield in his car with whatever's left that he didn't hit. See, this guy would never, if they were playing baseball out here, he would never go out on a baseball field and do baseballs. He would use any other part of this 10 million square foot park. But no, he thinks because, oh, there are only 2 guys flying model planes, I'm going to just shoot some at them and see how cute I can be. Well, you know, baby, you picked the wrong guy. And we'll see how the day goes out. This meatball. Imagine guys are playing soccer, and you go out with your golf ball in the middle of their soccer field and start doing this. How long do you think it'd be before you weren't hanging in a tree? You could hang them from a light pole. More to come. One of the things we did on the last flight, we moved the lead outs as far forward as they would go. Now, they just show what we did, and of course we made a mistake. We moved them so far forward that they're binding on the wood. So what will happen is, if these are binding, watch what happens. See how it just stays where you put it? That's part of why it was oscillating. So move it just back enough that we're not rubbing on that wood. You know, because we have those slices of wood in the wingtip. And if you have any binding out here at the lead out guide at all, it's not going to ever lock in level flight. It's not going to be a function of the CG.
There we go.
Okay, just move it back enough. Also, what I do, take your finger, wipe some oil on it. Put a little bit on each wire. Okay, just let that work its way in too. The first thing that'll happen if you can't hold level flight and you have a bind in the controls, that'll do it. Especially with a plane that flies relatively light on the lines like an Obler. You felt it had a lot more corner, a little more corner, medium.
It has more corner.
Okay.
But it's got this feeling like it's never going to sharpen up, and I suppose it might not.
Well, we'll find out in one flight here.
But it's better.
But that binding definitely is part of the problem. and possibly that the hinges even need it. Do you got any oil you can put on the hinges? You're going to wipe the whole plane down at the end of the day anyway. Put a little bit of oil on the hinges too. See, those controls aren't even really worn in yet. Put it right out on the end. Don't fool around with it in the middle like that. Put it right out on the end.
You don't yell at me.
What we're trying to do is add a little bit of area and a little bit of a tweak to this flap, because as we get in the plane the corner harder and harder, it seems to want to fly with the inner wing down. I think basically because of the CG. Possibly one of the things would help here, I'm just thinking about something, because of where this tab has to be, Ken, would be even smaller wheels, is to put like 2-inch wheels on it for flying over tar.
Yeah.
That would definitely help, because then you'd need less of a tab once you got that vertical CG dialed in.
Nah, this tape doesn't want to stick.
You can't even get it to stick for one.
Yeah, I'll have to clean it again.
You got the M600 there?
Yeah.
Fresh now.
It's coming little by little. Now we've got the CG back, solder on the tail wheel, spinner off. Seems like we could use lighter wheels. That would definitely, because it has that tendency to fly. The wheels are pushing out. Again, we got a little bit of tab. Now what we could have done here, if we knew this ahead of time, of course, we could get clear plastic canopy material and make all these tabs with clear plastic, which is one of the things I'm going to do. And we want to try adding a little bit of area here. That's one of the tricks that, like Ted Fancher, Paul Walker, you see a lot of them always have a little area tab on the outside. It's just one of the things that's worth trying, especially being we're in between the raindrops here. We don't even know. In between the golf balls. This guy was out picking his golf balls up before. It's really getting on my nerves. I don't know. I'm going to have to go over there and say something to him. What's nice about doing this, with all these little aluminum, you can just cut them with scissors and play musical chairs right at the field. If you were going to go home and do this permanently every time, you'd need a month of doing this. But you can tweak these, you can bend them, and that just pretty much gives you an idea roughly where you want them, and you can go make permanent ones. Right in the middle of Ken's last flight, the rain comes back. We're going to pack it in. But we did get a couple little things, I hope, sorted out here in the bank. We know we're going to need some rudder offset. We could use some more motor offset. And I would suggest if you're building one from scratch, put in even a little bit extra motor offset and carve in a little more rudder offset than even in the plans show. Certainly wouldn't hurt. And it's starting to, oh, we got the end of the flight here. Trying to convince him at the end of the pattern, just fly it out. We didn't have enough drama today. We got a big giant accident right in front of us. Oh, a lousy end to a crazy day. Look at this nonsense. Oh boy, just a crazy end to a crazy day. Tomorrow's the circle burner contest. See you then. Well, we woke up Sunday morning, and of course it's pouring, but the prognosis is it's going to stop raining later in the day. I don't know. Anyway, we wanted to see if anybody was at the club field, or if the field is underwater. I don't have any high hopes for today. We have really taken some hits on the weather this year. But this is what it's like living in New Jersey. You just never know. This is Steve Thompson showing off his plane right in front of the Grand Coulee Dam. And one of the things he mentioned, this is the first plane he ever flew in, and the first plane he soloed in. So I mean, that's kind of neat to have that go over a long span of being a pilot. Steve Thompson, hey, thanks for the photo. Now, I use this for another test. What I wanted to do, I wanted to see, I wet sanded out. This has 2 coats of that clear on it, that Randolph Brodak clear. And what I'm gonna, it's pouring rain out there all day, so what I'm gonna do, I'll do some little detailing on the prop later. But I wanted to basically see how this sanded out the day after it was painted. And you can see it sands out relatively nice and flat. And that's always the test of a good material. And I was real impressed to see that I could buff this so quickly afterwards too. Now one of the things, because when you're painting in a hurry, you always get this happening, this where the edges fade. So what I'm going to do is just run an ink line down there as one of the ways to cover up my little error. And we will definitely wait for a nice day, a really nice day, to do the final touches and the final clear on that prop, because that's one of the props we count as one of our #1 props, square one props. Have these melted lines. One of the things you can do, it's kind of a fudge way to do it, but it works. Always the bottom line. I want to move that up just a little millionth of an inch. You'll see what it does. It gives you a real nice neat line, as opposed to here's one that's smudged because we were rushing to paint. Again, this would normally not happen if you let everything dry overnight, but we're in a time restraint here. We're coming up on the Nationals, we're coming up on Brodax contest, and we really want to put the push on a lot of these little details. Now see, it won't matter in this case, even if I get a smudge out onto the black, because I can just cover it up this way. No, I just try to simulate those little Rotel decals that are on there. But we're certainly going to wait for a nice dry day to put the final coats of clear. And this will be a great, we're accomplishing two things. We're dressing up a prop that we could use in the future all the time. It's one of our square one props. The other thing too, it'll give us a good test of how this dope is going to adhere right to the carbon fiber props, and if it's going to stand the test of time. Well, after 2 unbelievable days of rain, it looks like we finally got a little sun, and we'll get to maybe get, if the field isn't underwater. See, you never know if this field is underwater or not. But beautiful downtown Rutherford. Oh, it's this time of year you can smell the flowers in between the floods. Look who's on my flying field this morning. Look who's on my flying field. Bambi. Bambi. Look at this now. I thought the field would be really a lot wetter. We'll get some flights in today. Bambi doesn't want to hear the tune pipes today. Yeah, field doesn't look too bad. Now you can see what a mess everything is. Look, the latest thing in stunt technology, hip boots. Anyway, they work. Now one of the purposes of today's test, I have 2 of these props, and I wanted to make sure both of them, they're both exactly the same prop in fact, that the dope that we've put on isn't going to start chipping and peeling and whatever a few flights into it, because that really tells you something very significant about the chemical and mechanical bonding of the dope to raw wood. And that really is a good test. That's one of my favorite tests, in fact. And one of the things I still have to do, obviously, we're going to hopefully have a day with no rain or less humidity. You couldn't paint today. I don't know if you can even see it. There's a fog hanging over the field of moisture. Not a good day for solid lines, not a good day to paint. But we can do some prop testing on this. And I'll feel good if I can get, well, you got about 1/3 of a gallon left there. Maybe 1/3 of a gallon of fuel through here. And if I don't see any props, any chips in the paint on both of the props, I'll switch them about halfway through the test. I'll figure I've got good mechanical and chemical bonding on this material. And see, what's real important is to do these tests before you run off a $20,000 order on dope. This is the hard part that nobody wants to do. Everybody wants to just run out and paint. Well, from what we've done with the fuselage on the Oriental and this, I can just be I'm real excited about the prospect of making the finishing easier for everybody that's going to be wanting to do some real nice finishing in the future. I think this is going to be a major step forward for all of us. Now, one of the things on a day like today, when you have kind of, I don't know how to describe today. Today's kind of a underwater Captain Nemo kind of day. Anyway, you have a day like today, one of the things I can do, and I started doing this before we started shooting footage, I went and moved the lead outs forward, moved the lead outs back, just to see right about at what point in the range I was. I was right about 1.5 inches behind the CG, but with the nose lightened up like this, the plane seems to track just a little better with the lead outs all the way back. So one of the things, now I have it marked with a little scratch on the paint. One of the things I want to know is where these lead outs would be with the K and B, where they would be with the double star, because that will be something that changes. Plane is about, the way I have it set with the weight and the back plate and everything, about 3/4 of an ounce more nose heavy with the K and B. But because it turns a bigger prop, it seems the motor, it's a more hard charging plane with the K and B, and you can look back at some of the old video and see that. But with this motor has much nicer stunt characteristics, much more like what we'll call a Fox characteristic. So you can capitalize on that a little bit too. By having both setups, you can really figure out, well, which is going to be right for you. Which one do you like the best? And not get caught up in an argument of trying to figure out whose motor is the best. These motors are both excellent. And they both have one tendency that's kind of annoying to me when you fly with the Sujas. They don't like to start hot. I lied! The only thing that's really a handicap today, and I mean it's a big handicap, with these boots on, the combination of the boots and the water on the field and relatively dead air, I can't back up in between maneuvers. So you can see in that last footage the plane is just, in fact, here comes a little breeze right now. I see the flag on a pole. But you really can't back up like when the ground is dry. So I've been just trying to play it safe. Live to fight another day. Now, a couple of things worth mentioning because of the air being so. Well, you never can win here. It's either dead, it's blowing in your face, or whatever. One of the things that I found, I know what the numbers are. I spoke to Bill Netzband one time and got the exact numbers. The numbers are that when an airplane increases in weight, it's the weight of the plane that determines the wake turbulence. In other words, a 747 makes a much greater wake behind it than a 727. Anyway, similar to that in models, a Spitfire right now, or a Pattern Master, would be making, because of its increase in wing displacement and weight, would be making a much larger wake. Now, one of the things that we kind of beat the system on here a little bit is the fact that this plane doesn't throw a tremendous wake, but what happens, it fools you. You get two loops, and then the third one will be in its own wake, and it'll come around and shake and shudder with the wings stalling. And when you can back up, the minute you can see that happening or feel it happening, well, heck, it's no problem at all. You just take two big steps back and it's gone. Or if you watch people flying in dead air, say at the Walker fly-off, they constantly back up. Problem is here, as soon as I tried backing up off the pad, I went into about 3 inches of water and mud, and it, needless to say, it was not fun. There's one other thing I wanted to try today. I had one other prop here. In fact, I ought to try it right now before the air gets any worse. That was starting to accumulate a real, well, probably $100 worth of props that we've got tested. And the one determining factor is when we put the K and B in, of course, you need to pitch low. When you put the double star in, you need to pitch high. So I wanted to, there's some of these that have a little bit extra pitch. This might be a good time to try one of them. Again, being we're not wasting any good air, I want to have as much of this done before we actually go out to Brodex as possible. I don't want to get out there and be changing props. I'd like to have some idea of which prop is going to work. At least under dead air conditions, you certainly want as much pitch as possible. You certainly don't want to be worried about wind up when there's no wind to wind up. You know, this prop I have marked as, I've marked it right on the prop, that it was fast with the K and B, but because this engine is running slower RPM. First off, it's a 12-inch prop. This is a 12.5. This is one that John Brodak sent me to test. It's relatively fast for the K and B, but that doesn't mean that we can't get it. Well, it's worth one flight anyway. And again, if you're going to waste a flight, you don't want to waste a flight on the day you can be flying. You waste a flight here that you're just chasing bugs. I always do. See, I have this one marked as a Phillips entry. I always want to write on here, so that I know for my own reference that come back to the club field, this is one of the props that was working real well. And by the way, that finish, there isn't a chip anywhere in this finish. Really excited about doing some more testing on this dope even as time goes by. It really looks like it's got a good adhesion qualities. As if I needed to say it, anytime you're fooling with any of these nylon razor blade props, even though these are rounded, I still like to have a guard on my finger. Piece of hose, tune pipe connector, anything that you can make work for you. Anyway, it is a relatively big prop, but because it's got a lot of pitch, it may be that this engine will be happy turning it. If it isn't, we've wasted a flight, and that's all there is to it. Now I want to mark that prop, the 12.5 Bali, definitely I'm not in the right RPM range. This engine wants to run a lot slower. So we'll mark this up for the K and B only, and that'll save us one test that we don't have to do over and over again. unless we make some radical change. Now it has started to rain, and I'm just going to narrow this test down to 2 or 3 other props. In fact, it may be ending sooner than that. I see we got raindrops on everything here, so well, we get what we can get. We're back to square one. Rain has stopped. Now I know this is a prop that worked real well on a Fox 35, so I would assume it's a 10/6. Again, another one that John Brodak sent for testing purposes, and we made a couple of these up for Ken's Nobler. They seem to work good on a Nobler. When we originally tested the Double Star with that big extension unit, I remember we did fly this once or twice, but couldn't really get any conclusions from it. It's a whole different animal with the motor moved up forward like this. And I don't know how much of this you can pick up off the video, if anything, that these little subtle changes, like the change from a windy day when you would want to go down in pitch to control wind up or be in open air, to a day like today where you could, if I had a 10.7, I'd put it on the plane. The pitch, being able to change right at the field and having some idea what's going to happen to it is such an important thing. Now the old 10.6, the motor really ran nice, and only one problem, it's a little weak. This plane really is a little bit large and a thick wing. We'd really like to have 10 1/4, 10 1/2, maybe an 11.5 cut down. We don't know yet. But again, more testing. Now I have one of the AHM 11.5, 6.5s cut to 10.5, and we have never tried this on the plane yet. So again, being we're not wasting any good air, good time to check them. Mark them all up, put them in the bank. And every day that goes by, we get a little more information, a little more knowledge in our database. We're a little more able to compare the Double Star and the K and B, and able to help other people that are trying to fine-tune the plane. When we get out to Brodak's, we have a whole box of props people can run over and try. A little less pitch, a little more pitch, more diameter, less diameter. And if you find a combination that works for your plane and your setup, and just go make a mirror image of the prop. It's real easy to do this. It's like going to a shoe store and trying shoes on, and a significant trim change. See, my feeling is it's more important to have the right prop on the plane, almost, than having the right motor in the plane. It's just a really significant thing. When the RPM of the motor matches the pitch of the prop at the speed you want to fly at under those conditions, you really have that sweetest of sweet combinations. It'll lock, it'll turn, it'll just give you the 2-cycle at the top of the maneuvers. When it's wrong, and it's soft on tension in places, and the motor isn't too foreign right, or it isn't running right, or you're overheating or overrunning and you can't get fuel consumption right, a myriad of things all go bad when you don't have the prop tuned to match the setup, the plane and the motor. Let's see, for the average sport flyer, you're basically going to just go bolt the prop on and let it pull a plane. But when you want to compete, and even if you're only doing it, like in my own case, it's my own entertainment value, I like to know where that limit is. Like when you put a 10.6 on a plane, where does it get soft? When you put the 12-inch prop on, why won't the motor turn to 12-inch? If we wanted to use that, we'd probably cut it down to 11.25, 11.5. Knowing which of these props is going to fit the K and B, which of these is going to work well on the Double Star, and then being able to compare them. It's just an infinitely variable thing. And it takes so much time, so much energy, but when you have it right, boy, if you ever have it right even once in your life, you'll know it, because you'll always want it back. Remember what really happens here. What's really happening is as you increase the prop diameter or the pitch or both, you're increasing the load on the motor. The motor needs to be able to turn it effectively. If you have a prop with too much of a load, the motor isn't able to get into the RPM range where it's effective. If you have a prop that's underpitched, for instance, if we were to run a 4-pitch prop on a double star, what probably, not always, but probably would be the case, it's just going to scream its lungs out, and it's not, this motor isn't designed to scream its lungs out. This motor is designed to grunt and groan, to run much like a tiger. So these are the things you want to match the prop to the engine. You want to match the prop to the plane. The airplane is also putting a load on the prop. You notice when you let go of the plane, and as soon as it unloads and it's in its own air, the motor will always kind of pick up a little bit of RPM. It unloads in the air as soon as you get into the air. Anyway, for all that little information, you'd be amazed at how many people have no idea that that's the case, or they think it's not important and they just bolt on a prop and go fly the plane. And they're always missing that really nice performance. Don't tell me we finally have a dead battery. I've only been using it for 4 weeks. Before I make myself crazy here, let me see if the battery's dead. Because I have to take that battery and charge it. Hey, one of the things we haven't done at all with this engine yet is try different glow plugs. So what I want to do, as long as I'm going to fool around here. Ooh, now this is a SIG plug. This is the plug that came with the engine. And I'm sure you can't see it on the... Let's just see, just for laughs, if you can see it. I don't know if you can. What's happened is after... Let's look right there, okay? You see how the element is all off to one side? Well, what we're going to do is put a Thunderbolt 1.5 volt RC in here, just for a test. Now the motor may run better, it may run worse. Sometimes it runs, you don't even know the difference. Sometimes it'll really make you crazy. That'll usually happen after a, let's see now, this is a brand new Thunderbolt. You see how the coil is almost directly in the center? That's how you'd really like it to be, that it almost disappears under the idle bar. Now we'll see if this makes any real difference in the needle setting or whatever. Here we haven't even gotten into plugs yet. Almost every time though, what happens with real stunt engines that 2.4 and don't scream, is you usually wind up with the hottest plug you can put in the engine. Almost every time. Anyway, this double star is so much like a Fox that it's scary. It really is. It really has all the characteristics of a Fox. Show you something. This is a bad propeller. If you look at the prop arc, you'll see there's 2 prop arcs. You see there's 2. I don't even see this. There's 2 prop arcs, so I don't even want to fly the plane with this propeller. That prop is an accident waiting to happen. Now we got to go home and straighten that prop out, but basically got a little something accomplished today. We got wet. We learned how to use an umbrella and boots. Now even on a day like today, there's something worth celebrating. We have our first lily of the year. The first lily is up. And the fish, of course, are all smart enough to stay underwater where they can't get wet. Oh, but I love that lily. Oh, when Karen comes home and sees her lily. This is her baby lily. One of the things, as soon as I get back to the shop, I like to make these little corrections. Now, believe me, you really don't know unless you look down a prop while it's running, and what happens is you see two blades. You see every time it rotates around. Now, what that usually means is the back face of this is either not machined correctly. In case AHMs, believe me, the machining is terrible, but they need to be hand corrected. But once they're hand corrected, they're made out of a nice light beech wood. So what I try to do is I lay this flat on a table now and decide, let me get my little tool. What I want to do is lay this flat on a piece of glass that I know is relatively flat and see which blade is the high blade. And see if what happens a lot of times that they check out fine before you put them on a motor, and then what happens, you hit the spinner back plate, you tighten it, and it reseats itself. So what I'm going to do is just check it with a little bit of pressure on here. Okay, that's a 4 at the back, and that's a 3 at the back. So this side is the high side. So what I'll try to do is just take a couple of swipes of the sandpaper. You really never want to look down. Let me tell you, it's the worst thing in the world is to be looking down a prop arc, because if it picks a stone up, it'll hit you right in the eye. But anytime you put a new prop on, you'd like to at least glance by once and see that you don't have two separate blades. In this case now, just going back to check it, and I'm checking it at the trailing edge. Looks like I could take one more swipe off of this. Now, the reason I don't want to leave any of this out that I've learned basically the hard way. What I've done is I've had some props that have been, I'll call them out of kilter this way, especially carbon props, 3-bladed props. You almost always get one blade that's a little cocked in it. But what I've always seen happen with those, it doesn't seem to affect performance any, but you'll be right in the middle of a maneuver, and at some resident range you'll get a buzz. And I've seen that happen. And when I've corrected the props, that buzz goes away. Now, I don't know how that relates, you know, if you're a rocket scientist, if that's going to work. But I know in the real world, when they track, you get the least amount of buzzing. Okay, that's real close now. Now, the other thing I wanted to do with this prop has so much pitch in it. What I want to do, I want to put some Phillips entry in it, and I want to reduce the diameter just a little bit, because I know I can go further with this prop. Now, with the extra pitch in here, you can see how thick these are. These are 6.5 inches of pitch. A Phillips entry, and a Phillips entry tends to unload the prop, so it'll give me just a little more zip in the 2-cycle part of the run. So what I want to take is the leading edge, the back of the leading edge, and I'll do this over the sanding belt and carve in. Just get that little edge removed. And that'll usually let the motor unload 200 or 300 extra RPM, just a little bit. And if you look back at the video, the one right on it, you can see the plane is really going on the border of being too slow. Not really too slow yet, but it's really toward that end. So a little more drive, a little more Phillips entry on the prop, and then we'll go out to the field, and the next time we do get to try this, we'll have a good comparison. I have 3 or 4 of these cut up in bigger and smaller diameters. And the nice thing about these, the wood props, again, very inexpensive. So far, the best props for the double star, 11.5 and 11.6 BYNO, and this 11.5 by 6.5 cut down to this one is 10.5. And we're going to cut it to 10.25. Just get rid of the prop load even just a little bit more. Get a lot of Phillips entry in one shot. What I can do, I can get a lot of it off with the belt thing. I'm taking that leading edge and just putting a radius on it. So I just want to take, you can see what happens. I want to take the thickness of 1 piece 1/8 inch tape. That'll take this down to 10 1/4. I know it's hard to see on the tape, so maybe this is an easier way. When you look at a prop cross section, especially an AHM, even a rev up, it's typically a flat bottom. The reason they do that, it's easy to set the prop carving machine. And what a Phillips entry is, let's just exaggerate, this is not a good thing, exaggerate it here, is we're taking some of this material off, some of this material right here. So in effect we're increasing the pitch, because here this would be the normal pitch, and when we take this a little amount of material and make the airfoil symmetrical, we're in effect increasing the pitch. But we're also thinning the blade section somewhat, and a symmetrical airfoil, anybody that even studies anything about aerodynamics, a symmetrical airfoil where both sides are closer to the same than a Clark Y, where one is much different than the other. This allows the motor, the air resistance is much less, and the increase in pitch and the reduction in drag results in just having a more thrust intensive setup. So any kind of Phillips entry, even a crude one like this, now I'll hand sand the rest of this in and of course balance it, but even the crudest thing, that'll definitely give you more drive, more thrust, more drive in the corners. And always good, once you have a prop that's working good for you, make a standard one and make a Phillips entry one and then go back and forth. This will work exceptionally well on a hot day. Now it wasn't hot out there today and we were already getting a little soft on power. This'll be the equivalent of going up in nitro, which is another way to do the same thing. But the best way I know of is just carve up some $3 props. And you'll learn as you go. You try a little less diameter, a little more Phillips entry, a little. Eventually you're going to come upon that sweet spot. Just another example, on a carbon prop it's even easier because you have nice solid material to work with. You don't have to worry about making it too thin. Just a little bit up here. If I had a spare one, since this one is working real well, and I definitely can't do any of the clear on it today, but I could Phillips entry the front of this, and maybe even take a little bit on the opposite side of the back, and it would just give me that little fine tuning. That's the best little trick in the world, when you're just looking for that little extra drive. Now that sticky back paper and a ringmaster leading edge is a good combination for putting a nice fine sanding finish on that. Again, this is something you can do right at the field, but as soon as you get home, you want to get some paint or some thin CA, or even in worst case scenario some wax on here, otherwise the prop starts absorbing oil. Again, I'm hitting, just thinning out the back of the blade and carving that leading edge down. That is such a neat little trick, and not many people take advantage of that because it takes a little time and energy to put that into a prop. And if they had to do that at the prop carving station, it would be a nightmare. They'd have to have a lot of extra commands, or however they program it, would be a lot of extra work. I'll make sure I'm not making the heavy blade, the light blade, any thinner than I have to. Okay, that's ready to paint. Always balance the wood first and then balance it after the paint is on. In fact, that blade is still just a little, just a tad, one swipe of the paper on that one. No, I just ran outside, even though it's still raining out there. See, one of the things I wanted to find out about this material and using this new material that's going to become the Brodak dope, I want to see just how humid it can get before you have to add retarder. In this case, there's no retarder in this. And it looks like it's going to dry up without that foggy. Let me get a little closer on this.